Good afternoon, students. I'm going to see a few short notes today for you people. And you will also know the method of approaching a short note question. The topics for today include myxoma, pericarditis, and lab diagnosis of myocardial infarction. Please attend the projections carefully. You may not be having another slide. This is a slide of a myxoma. Myxoma is a benign tumor that is found in the left atrium. It can be found in the other tissues such as the peritoneum also. And here is a picture of the left atrium. I am finding a tumor. It has got a peduncle or a stalk. It may be pedunculated or sometimes it can be sessile itself. It is a very slow growing tumor, well capsulated and benign. But what is the damage because of a myxoma? In this, you find that there is a dynamic flow of blood that will be moving the lesion up and down. As a result of which, this will be coming and hitting against the wall, leading to a damage. This is called a wrecking ball damage. A wrecking ball is a huge metal ball that is used by a crane to demolish buildings. That is the name of it. So this is likened to a wrecking ball. Microscopically, remember only two things. There will be few cells which are somewhat star-shaped in outline. They have got projections and they become star-shaped. They are called as stellate cells. They are called as stellate cells. And the background, it is sparsely cellular and loose. We call it a myxoid background. We call it a myxoid background. And this will be the picture of it. Virtually otherwise harmless tumor. It is only because of the location and the mechanical damage it can cause. Myxoma can be a question for you people, rarely asked. That is why I put it as nice to know. N2K is nice to know. See the difference. This is a D2K, which is desirable to know. Pericardial disease. When we talk about pericardial disease, there are two types. One is an effusion, another is an inflammation. Pericardial effusion and pericardial inflammation, pericarditis. The picture of the heart over here, and then it is surrounded by a bag-like structure that is folded on itself, called the pericardium. So these two lines are the pericardium. The inner one is the visceral and the outer one is the parietal layer, in which you have got the pericardial fluid. Externally, there is a thin layer of fibrous tissue that is seen, called as fibrous pericardium. So these are the layers. As we had mentioned earlier, the first condition can be pericardial effusion. Effusion is nothing but a collection of fluid. It can be serous. Serous is somewhat straw-colored, hardly cellular. It can occur in conditions like congestive cardiac failure or hypoproteinemia. Serosanguinous. Sanguinous means blood. So there can be an admixture with blood. This can happen in chest trauma. Chylous is milky, lymph, and this will occur in lymphatic obstruction. And rarely we can have cholesterol occlusion in a case of myxedema. So cholesterol effusion, these are the things. Serous, serosanguinous, chylous, and cholesterol types of effusion. So pericardial effusion is one. Look at this particular condition wherein blood is collecting. It is called as hemopericardium. Hemopericardium we had seen earlier also. Now what will happen is this blood collects outside. It prevents the heart from either dilating or constricting. The condition is called as cardiac tamponade. Cardiac tamponade, classical of myocardial infarction or a hemorrhagic pericarditis. This is more important. From now onwards, I would like you people to concentrate. See, this is the myocardium. And I've got two layers of the pericardium, the inner visceral and the outer parietal, within which there is a pericardial cavity. Normally, we have got about 20 to 50 ml of fluid that acts as a lubricant and also helps in the nutrition. Outer to this, there is a fibrous layer. This particular diagram, I would like you people to draw. Not even the heart, this two-dimensional diagram you people should draw. And pericarditis, there are lots of causes. I want you to just read this, need not by heart. There can be infections, there can be immunological conditions, and there can be miscellaneous conditions. Infection, whatever infection you know, you can mention. Viral, bacterial, tuberculous, or fungal. Immunological, some diseases prone for it, no? SLE and rheumatic fever, two conditions which are very important. Miscellaneous, whenever there is an infarction, uremia, we do not know for what reason, but then there is an inflammation in this. Radiation, whenever the patient undergoes a radiotherapy, there is chance of a pericarditis. So three types: infectious, immunological, and miscellaneous. These are the causes for pericarditis. And serous pericarditis, it occurs in SLE or in viral infections. I'm not going to go into the details. There is something called as serous pericarditis. Suppurative or purulent, you people know it is mainly the formation of pus. It occurs in bacterial infections, sometimes in mycotic infections. So there can be a suppurative pericarditis or a purulent pericarditis. This is more important, a fibrinous pericarditis. A fibrinous pericarditis, I have put it under desirable to know. You may get a question on pericarditis itself, or definitely when you mention this in other questions, you score a mark. It occurs in rheumatic fever. Other causes are mentioned. Mainly it will be in rheumatic fever, and the gross appearance is bread and butter pericarditis. We had seen this earlier. Look at this pericardium over here. They have separated, but then they find that there are multiple fibrous strands that are there. Probably this was sticking both the layers together, and when they separated, it is like strands of butter, and it is called as bread and butter pericarditis, classical of rheumatic fever, and usual MCQ that can be asked. You people should mention. Other types will be hemorrhagic pericarditis and caseous pericarditis. Hemorrhagic in any cancer you can get, and caseous and tuberculosis go hand in hand. So mention the types alone: hemorrhagic, caseous, fibrinous, serous. The last type will be an adhesive pericarditis. Sometimes it is so adherent you can see that it is almost like, say, a shield that can encompass the entire heart. The heart cannot move beyond this. It is like a solid block. We call it as concretio cordis, as though there is a concrete wall that has been formed around the heart. And sometimes we will be finding, say, areas of exudate on the surface, which is resembling a soldier's badge or a soldier's plaque. So question will be, soldier's plaque is found in dash, or concretio cordis is this. So some of the conditions have been mentioned. So you people should remember the different types of pericarditis. So So as a summary, what are the layers of the pericardium? What is pericardial effusion? What is pericarditis? What are the types of pericarditis? Morphology, particularly in fibrinous pericarditis, constrictive pericarditis, and any specific lesion. They can ask you otherwise also. In rheumatic fever, what is the type of pericarditis? In tuberculosis, what do you find? So the same question that can be asked in different forms. The last short note, which is more important actually. Important in the sense it can be part of an essay and it is a must-know category. Must know, it has been asked any number of times as an essay question or as a short note. And whenever we get a question like this, divide, subdivide, allot the subheadings and then proceed. So what are the changes that we can see? It can be ECG change, it can be enzyme change, two things only. But sometimes the patient might pass away and then after death, at autopsy, we can make a diagnosis. So I have purposely put this inside as a gross diagnosis at autopsy. So ECG changes, enzyme changes, and gross changes. What do I mean by it? The ECG changes. I am not a cardiologist, and so also you. But some basic things alone we can remember. There is an elevation of the ST segment. This is the ST segment. There is an elevation of the ST segment within hours. There is only one slide for ECG, so please concentrate. So there is an elevation of the ST segment. And here also, after days, you find that there is still an elevation of the ST segment, and there can be inversion of the T waves. The T waves coming down. And there is pathological Q waves which come below the level. So you find that there are abnormal Q waves which are formed. Once you get this, you see that they will be present for weeks and months. So pathological Q waves are seen in days, weeks, as well as months. And after this, you find that there will be a gradual flattening of the ST segment. Here it is elevated, here it is becoming more flattened. So these are the things that you people should remember. ST elevation, formation of the Q waves, and then there can be inversion of the T waves and flattening. Please do remember this. These are the changes. We are not cardiologists, but still we will have to mention these. Enzyme changes, you have already seen this in biochemistry, but still it is a recapitulation. There are three types. One is troponin C. Troponin is a major enzyme in which you have got troponin C, T, and I. C is not very important in myocardial infarction, whereas troponin T and I are ideal. These cardiac isoforms are present in the myofibrils and they are released whenever there is damage to the cardiac fiber. So please remember this particular table, not throughout, follow what I am saying. So these are the enzymes: troponin, creatinine kinase, myoglobin, lactate dehydrogenase, and SGOT. Of these, you find troponins and creatinine kinase are most important and they are preferred. They are preferred. The values are raised. So troponins and creatinine kinase. What is this MB? We shall be seeing. So this is a picture of myocardial infarction, and then there is a damage of the fibers, damage to the actin and myosin filaments, and then the troponin is being released into the circulation. You get the high values. So this value, the graph can help you in the elevation and the flattening of the curves. Troponin, this is definitely expected for a few people. One is troponin I and the other is troponin T. The normal values are given. When it is more than 0.2 nanograms, troponin I is significant. And similarly, troponin T, when it is more than 1 nanogram, it is indicative of myocardial infarction. Troponin, please remember troponin I, troponin T. formed from the actin and the myosin filaments. Creatinine kinase, it has got three isoenzymes, MM, MB, and BB. MM is found in the skeletal muscle, BB in the brain, and MB in the heart. So normally you find that this is the value, but when it is going to be increased beyond 10, 15 and all, it is significant. The values are given for males and females. So creatinine kinase, MB isoenzyme is significant of myocardial infarction when it is raised. Myoglobin was mentioned in the table. It is not significant, but a negative myoglobin rules out a myocardial infarction. It rules out a myocardial infarction. Otherwise, it is not significant. Lactate dehydrogenase, earlier it was very useful. Of these, again, there are 5 isoenzymes, LDH1 to up to 5. And LDH1 is supposed to be the isoenzyme which is increased in myocardial infarction. So please know the normal values are here, and when it is raised beyond 200, it is significant. SGOT used long back, but not nowadays. It is not indicative and it is being replaced by the troponins. But still we will mention in our answers for the sake of completion. The lipid profile you people would have read repeatedly in your biochemistry. Just know the tabular columns alone. When we say lipid profile, cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL, triglyceride. And long back you find that more than 250 was supposed to be significant, but now it is of a high risk. And the normal cholesterol is less than 200. Earlier up to 250 was normal, but now they have become very strict with it. There is a method of study called the Framingham study, in which more than 240 is a high risk group. LDL cholesterol is increased in a case of myocardial infarction. HDL cholesterol, colloquially called the good cholesterol, is decreased in myocardial infarction. Triglycerides, they are more than doubled in a case of myocardial infarction. So these are the markers. The lipid profile is definitely mandatory for any patient with myocardial infarction. And the C-reactive protein, it is an inflammatory protein found in any kind of inflammation. Again, for the sake of completion, more than 3 milligrams per liter is indicative of high risk, and it peaks in 2 to 4 days. C-reactive protein. So what is the summary? There is an ECG which shown with can show abnormalities. Cardiac troponins, very significant. Creatinine kinase, MB isoenzyme, lactate dehydrogenase 1 and sometimes 2. Plasma lipid profile, very important, and protein kinase C. So these are all the parameters that you will have to mention in the lab diagnosis. Then what am I showing last? This is an autopsy specimen. The patient has died and it has been removed. And when we paint the heart with triphenyl tetrasodium chloride, it takes up a red color. The normal heart takes up a red color, whereas the area of infarct becomes pale and it does not take the red color. It is supposed to be diagnostic of myocardial infarction. In an early stage, it will not be seen, and triphenyl tetrasodium chloride can be used for the death due to myocardial infarction within a very short time. So I hope that you people have understood. Once again, a piece of warning, it is a difficult question, but if you prepare systematically, it will be easy. ECG changes, enzyme changes, cardiac changes. If there is so.